in an earlier exercise, we had containerized an Express application. In this exercise, we're going to look at how we can do local development using Docker containers for the same Express application. Along the way, we'll examine how we can, in general, do local application development using Docker containers. If you haven't done the previous exercise, this is a good time for you to go back and complete that exercise, because we're going to start off at the point where we left off in the previous exercise and continue further modification of the code there. So here I have the Express application and the Docker file for the Express application open in Visual Studio Code. Now I'm going to start off by adding a .gitignore file to this project, and then add node modules to the .gitignore file because we don't want to check in those node modules. In addition, we are also going to add in a Docker ignore file to this project where we will specify all those files that should not be included into the context when we are building the image. So in the Docker ignore file, of course, I'm going to ignore the gitignore file itself. Then we're going to avoid using the node modules folder in case we have that in this project. Also, we're going to not include the Docker file itself. And then later on, I will add a Docker compose file to this project, which also should not be included into the image. In addition, if we end up generating an npm debug.log file in this project, then we should ignore that file also. So I will add all these to the .dockerignore file here. Now, after this, let's save the changes, and then we'll go ahead and modify the Docker file itself. Now, in the Docker file, earlier I had used the Alpine image. Now, I'm going to fix this to a 14. When we are doing local development, we would rather use a specific version of the node image file from Docker Hub. So I'm going to fix this to 14, which is the latest version. And I'm going to also use the slim version of the 14. Alpine works fine, but in some circumstances, you may run into problems with certain NPM modules that you install. So to avoid any issues, I'm just going to use the slim version of the Node 14 Docker image. The slim version is smaller than the full-fledged Node version, and that will suffice for most Node-based applications. Now, in addition, where we created this folder named home node app, I'm going to create the node modules folder in there. So now, because we include the -p flag to the make dir command here, so this will automatically create the app folder in case it doesn't exist while it is creating the node modules folder. And also, as earlier, I will change the ownership of this to the node user in this container. And then after that, we'll set up the working directory to home node app as we did before. And the user also, I'm going to switch to node here. Now, when we include any run command in our Docker file, that adds a layer. When we are essentially doing local development, the frequent changes would be to the source code files rather than to the package.json. Anytime we make a change to any source file, if we retain the Docker file as here, every time we rebuild the image, then we are going to do an npm install all over again, even if the package.json file has not changed. So to avoid that issue, I'm going to switch the order in which I do these two steps. So I'm going to cut this out and then do the npm install earlier than copying the source files into the image here. In addition, before we begin, we will first copy the package star.json files into the current folder. And then after that, we will do an npm install. So this set of steps will add one more layer to the Docker image that we create. But every time we make a change to a source file, this set of steps would have been cached while the Docker image for our application is being built. So we don't need to repeat installing all the node packages every single time. And instead, when we are rebuilding the image, it will use the cached version that has all these steps already done in our building of the image there. In addition, I'm going to clean up the npm cache after I do the npm install. Also, we will add to the path the node modules bin folder so that if we install nodemon later, we will be able to use it from the command line. So we'll add in this node modules bin folder to our path here. In addition, the command itself, we would simply execute the node bin www, just like what we have in the package.json file. So we will execute this directly. Let's now save the changes to the Docker file. And now we can build the image and launch our Express application. Going to the terminal, at the prompt, let's go ahead and build the image for our application. And then we can launch the Docker application. Going to the browser. Now at the address, if we type localhost 3000, you can see that our Express application is up and running. Now, if we want to make any changes to the Express application, let's go to the Visual Studio Code. In the Visual Studio Code, let me open the index.js file and then make a small modification to the index.js file. So with this small modification here, let me go ahead and save the changes. And then we will go back and rebuild the image. First, make sure to shut down the node container that is running at the moment. And then let's go ahead and rebuild the image. So we'll say docker build -t node app. And when we rebuild the image, you will notice that up to this point, our rebuilding of the image uses the cache from the previous build. So this way, if you modify any of the source files, only the part of those layers that come after copying in the modified source files need to be rebuilt, and the previous layers can be reused from the cache. So this saves us the time in rebuilding the image. So by first doing the npm install before we copying the remaining source files, this way we are able to reuse the cache if there is no change in the package.json file itself. Now, once the new image is built, let's go ahead and launch the container. Going back to the browser, let's type in localhost 3000, and you will see that now the modified application is being served up by the container. Now, obviously, you're going to look at me and say, is this the way we are supposed to do local development? Which means every time we make a change to a source file, we rebuild the image. Isn't there a better way of doing this? Well, hold off until the next part of the exercise that will come in the next video, where we will look at a better way of doing local development using bind mounts.